computer. And all right, so I'm going to count you in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead.
So welcome to the discussion about Nina Wu. I'm Angela, and I'm excited to talk about this film because I really like it.
Me too. Well, I want to hear from the people that I haven't talked to yet about this film.
I know you and I talked about it a little bit, Catherine.
Here, I'm going to jump on. I want to talk about it because I just watched it.
Awesome.
I absolutely loved it. I loved it. I liked how, like it was just so non-narrative, like as far as like non-linear narrative, and I really liked that. And I felt like, considering, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get spoilers in this because we're having a conversation about it. The sort of the aspect of PTSD as a survivor, I thought like the way that the sort of memory sort of unfolded was so appropriate to how that sort of actually happens in life. And I really like it. It was really kind of amazing how, you know, they kind of got that across in the sort of the writing and also the sort of like sort of structure of the film as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's probably me.
I was able to rewatch like the first half of it this morning before we went to shit. Oh, Lena's here. Lena Wu.
Whoa.
Hi.
Sorry, I was on a couple devices just trying to find the number for this meeting.
That's okay.
How to find it.
It's confusing for all of us. How did you like the movie?
Very much. I like spent a lot of time in Taiwan, so it brought up a lot of nostalgia because it's like very, very Taiwanese. And I wasn't like, when you mentioned this film, Katie, I didn't know if it was a Taiwanese movie. I just thought like it's a Chinese movie or something. And it's like, it was very particular. I don't know. I really enjoyed that.
How was it Taiwanese?
Yeah.
What?
How was it? In what respect was it Taiwanese?
Just because of like the locations and the like demeanor of the people and stuff. Yeah.
How do you think it? Because the one thing I've been very curious about is how this film fits into the culture there. Because I think even here, it's so stark, and I think it's a gorgeous film, and I feel weird saying that it's a gorgeous film, given sort of the arc of the film. But even here, it's stark, and I'm curious culturally, how do you think it plays there, in terms of her relationships with people, and in terms of the Me Too movement?
Well, I'm not an expert on this topic per se, but one thing about Taiwanese cinema is that it's really unique in world cinema because of the political history of Taiwan. So like Taiwanese cinema is just really exceptional in the way that it's risk-taking and very independently spirited. Tsai Ming-liang is another good example of just like a completely insane filmmaker that like takes risks and like presents highly sexualized aesthetic material that's just like totally shocking. So I think there's a long tradition of that kind of thing, and part of that is connected to the history of Taiwan as a country and as a culture, I think.
Thank you. That answered a lot of questions for me.
Oh, I don't know. It's just like,
No, it did. I mean, I think in
Sort
terms
of
of the
same
risk taking
concept,
in
but-
particular, because I think one of the things that's interesting is here, you know, when we talk about a Me Too story or anything like that, we want sort of a satisfying conclusion, right? Or we want something that makes us feel good about everything that we've watched and experienced. And well, we've got, I think with the story of Nina Wu, we've got the understanding that she didn't do anything wrong. And you're left with that clearly, but it doesn't tell you where she's supposed to put the shame or where she's supposed to put the guilt or where she's supposed to put the trauma. Which I think and maybe it's a uniquely American thing or it's a Western thing, but I found that very fascinating that it's just, I mean, it's just out there. Like Nina Wu for me exists as just sort of this moment that's just out there, and it's just this circling narrative of trauma that just keeps going and going and going, and it's just an exceptional film in my mind for that reason.
I mean, do you think in many ways that she didn't have room for the trauma because she was constantly sort of like cleaning up everything, the sort of the mess with her father, the mother, like there was a lot of sort of like this sort of like taking care of business that she kind of did in it, and that, which a lot of like it's sort of Survivor kind of like to kind of deflect. Do you think maybe that had a little bit to do with sort of the lack of space she had to really process it?
I mean, maybe, and I think her reaching out for the old relationship was sort of the signpost, right? You're like want to grab onto the tree in the storm, right? That was the one stable thing that it felt to me like she was grabbing toward. But I think what happened was so awful, and particularly given her sexual preference and her relationship, it was just so singularly terrible. And you and Sean, you and I talked about it a little bit, that she, even as she was remembering, she kept placing another woman in between her and the memory, right? So as she was sort of uncovering the trauma, she still had a buffer there. So, and it was only as we got closer to the end and we are starting to really see what happened, we see her walk past the buffer, which I found to be a very powerful moment in the film. And just, I mean, the ending scene itself is like, I don't know, that's something you're just not going to forget in a while. And I hesitate to talk about it too much because I want people to watch the film and not get spoiled, but
yeah,
I don't know. Ben, what did you think?
Well, I was just thinking about how from the structure and the ending you alluded to, that it if it were structured differently, you would, I liked the way it was structured because then I felt like she was surrounded by trauma just from everything else she was doing to either get by or deal with her family or to be in the film. And you would maybe misattribute that, or if it were fully chronological.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard to tell a trauma story in a chronological order because I don't think that that's how our minds and bodies experience trauma necessarily. I mean, certainly in a time space we do, but you know, it makes sense to me that we just sort of, that they're looping through. So I think your point is quite valid.
that point that Lena made about not knowing where to put the shame, I think that's true of many trauma victims, Western and Eastern. I don't know if it's different for the East than it is in the West, but that not knowing where to put the shame and kind of just eating away at the trauma victim is a big part of that experience, definitely.
One of the things that kind of really kind of stood out to me watching this afternoon was that the whole spa moment before her big sort of film festival sort of debut, and she sort of confronts the woman that she's kind of the buffer, I guess, with character. Like it was so strange, and like the how between the heat of the sort of like the spa device and the sort of like the confrontation of the cell phone camera and the video, and you
And the
got
fact
that
that she's
distance.
wrapped in plastic.
Yes. It's just like, yeah, she's exactly shrink wrapped too. Um like it was just sort of like it was really kind of interesting, sort of like what you think about detoxing in a spa, and sort of that sort of like the worst the worst spa treatment ever.
Well, and when you're in a spa, you are in a position where you can't distract yourself with like trying to control the things you can control, like your family and your relationship. Like you finally are just like, it's just you and your thoughts. So it makes sense that it would have cropped up then.
Well, and I also thought it was terrible that she was being sent there to make herself smaller.
Yeah.
She's already small. Yeah, she's already small.
Yeah, and it was just, I don't know. It was very fascinating. But yeah, you're right. I think when you're at the spa and you're laying on the table, you're very much in your own head.
Well, it was funny because like it also kind of mirrored also that outside perception, which really kind of factored into the film from the get-go, from her sort of casting call, well, from her sort of cam sort of career that she was, she had at the beginning. She's cooking, she's nourishing herself, but then she's doing it as a sort of like sort of performative. It's like this constant sort of performance, but then you also get that sort of the feedback of the outside between the casting directors and the director, and then that press junket, which was so equally as traumatic as a press junket. And you could tell, when you have that sort of joyousness of her sort of being celebrated as a model and getting those, looking gorgeous and getting those pictures taken. And then this is sort of like really sort of like traumatizing and demeaning sort of press junket. It's so interesting.
I'm still curious about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, Catherine, please.
Well, I like selfishly, I want to use you guys all to help me think of questions to ask Keshi Wu because I'm really intimidated by the subject matter. Like it's so intense, and I know some of it is autobiographical, and so I'm still working out kind of how to approach getting her to talk about that stuff. But I mean, I'm just so curious about, because I know it was co-screenwritten, just which bits are her and how much of it is really true to her life. Yeah, I don't know. It's we've had a lot of conversations about whether it was appropriate to include this film, and whether, I mean, to Ivy's point, which was a good one when we were having this conversation, like the reason we don't typically include male directors is because for too long we've been allowing men to tell stories about women, and instead of having them tell their own stories. But then by having Keshi both star in this film and co-write it from her personal experiences, it felt like there was enough of her in this. Plus the subject matter is so dead on to what we're trying to do. But.
Well, and it's also very much, it's like a very meta experience to have her. The stories about a woman in film and the abuse that she suffers at the hands of the male, I guess, establishment in film. So to have a male directing that, it just adds another layer to it. But I feel like it feels to me like it's an honest presentation, and that it's true to her. I'm very curious where she came up with the lines the refrain that she keeps saying. throughout, like where that came from.
Mm.
The first time you hear it about like she can't go on anymore, they keep doing this to her body. I
Yep.
mean, there's no context for it, and by the end of the film, I mean, that's everything.
Right.
And it's just incredibly powerful, and we don't know. I mean, I know next to nothing about the actual film that's being made, that the film's about.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Right.
But I feel like I know a lot about it at the same time. I don't know how they pulled that off, but and
I also
I still can't figure out the boat scene. I cannot figure out the boat scene. Like if they were totally messing with her by having the police come and the boat do what it did, but and having that be the end of the film in the film. But yeah, I don't know. It's really fascinating, and I don't know if she feels better having this story out in the world, if she feels like something has been resolved, or if
that's a good question. I'm writing
that's
down.
what I would want to know, actually.
I think that kind of aligns with the women who have come forward with their Me Too stories in a way, but in a way, this is a Me Too story that actually gets to be meta because it does get to be put into film. And Catherine, when when you co-wrote the original mission for the Boston Women's Film Festival, you talked about, I wrote it about women, and you said, and also males who are sympathetic to the female voice, and definitely the director is, and this is definitely it's almost better that it was by a man.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
I mean, it kind of gave her the distance to sort of like actually
Yes.
pack it a little bit, which was kind of nice. And it didn't necessarily feel like male gaze, which happens a lot in women's films, especially dealing around sexual assault. Also, stories of sort of women who are attracted to women
Right.
often get a male gaze kind of treatment, and they become sort of objects. And it sort of, even though she was sort of objectified in the film, it didn't feel like, it felt like it was definitely her story and her sort of path. And it was that sort of, I don't want to use the word empowerment because I don't think that's the right word, but it like almost like
It was purposeful.
yes, thank you.
Like it wasn't a perversion,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That's how I feel, but I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, I mean, I think too often in films there is something like rape and sexual assault is filmed in a way that's supposed to be tittillating, right? And the sexual violence in this film is in no way appealing. Like it's purely horrifying.
Well, I mean, it takes sort of this any kind of like titillation with sexuality, because I mean, they talked a lot about sort of like the role in the film of being full frontal, also in a threesome, and that threesome was like everything was staged, and you never actually saw the threesome, and you actually never saw her full frontally nude either.
Right.
Which was kind of like super, I thought that was so interesting that, because they talked about it a lot and they referenced it, but you never actually got to see it.
Do you think, so I was thinking about this today, like, do you think that sex scene, are they, and I've of course it's supposed to be unclear, but are they blocking, like, or is this just a sort of symbolic representation of the sex scene? Like,
I think they're blocking. I thought they were blocking, but I don't know. Joanne, what did you think?
I actually thought they were kind of shooting the potential poster, or the trailer, that they would shoot the shots for the trailer of the kind of, this will be titillating on the outside. There'll be the, but the blocking of where the mise en scène of where those characters are kind of placed and where the males are in, I mean, every one of those poses is, dominating in a demeaning way, and artful at the same time.
But I thought thinking about that and a few other scenes of the shooting of scenes, they were definitely two things at the same time, because the I don't know what it was when the camera backed up on the track during the meal. That was obviously the only camera, but it obviously also wasn't what they were using in the movie or to shoot their,
Mm.
because where would that camera have been?
Right.
So it's obviously the only camera there, and they're shooting the actual take, but it's the camera is way back there and it's doing something else. And so when you're asking if it was one or the other, and it's felt like a lot of them were neither, both.
Totally.
Oh,
I
sorry.
think that's because the film is always peeling back the idea of what's behind the making of a movie and what's behind the making of a movie that's exploitative. And I think that's a big part of what this film is doing.
Yeah. Well, and there are also like all those transitions, like in the boat scene that we were just talking about, or the scene where you think she didn't get the part and she's crying, and then you find out she's acting the part. And then that sort of jives with her inability to tell reality from fantasy by the end of the film too, right? And which we share in, because it's sort of, that distinction is kept from us throughout.
I mean, another thing I really thought was really interesting, and I want you to ask, is about dumplings, because dumplings are all up in this film.
Yeah.
To the point where the dumpling filling is spoiled when the girlfriend comes to visit her in Taipei, but they're eating dumplings. She's eating dumplings at the beginning. The secret note is in the dumplings in the film. The craft services for the film is dumplings. You know, you get chicken or pork, chicken or pork.
I love that there's literally a secret message in the dumplings. So it's like we're supposed to find a message, like we're supposed to read a symbol into the dumplings.
Well, I think in many ways, like the dumpling is like the package, and you get the sort of the filling, which is like sort of the secret note would be one thing, but also that sort of like nourishment or memory or something like that. I just thought it was super interesting, like this sort of thread of, and plus I was like craving dumplings by the end of it.
Too. And I was like upset when the dumplings were spoiled too. It hurt me.
Well, and when they finally got this scene right in the restaurant and she spit the dumplings out, that was a very vivid scene in my mind.
Yeah.
Because she looked like she was almost vomiting. She was really just like spitting the dumplings out. I don't know. It was very, very interesting.
And then was also followed up with a sort of the hair and makeup check too, which was also very like aggressive, which was kind of interesting too. Like, cause you don't necessarily, I mean, I guess that was to sort of like to illustrate the sort of the trauma on being on set, that sort of like that. But it was super, I was like, wow, they're really going in with this sort of hairspray, comb, lipstick, compact sort of like moment. It was very interesting. Sort of as a transition.
On the topic of dumplings, I've also been thinking about dumplings a lot lately, just because like there's a show on PBS lately about dumplings, and I was just like so craving it. But one thing I noticed is that the Chinese title for this film is like, the secrets that burn people, like burning people, or like scorching people. I think the English of the Chinese is like scorching secrets or something. So like the first scene in this film, the first action we see, like she's walking down the street, but like the first action is her making this like obscenely hot meal. Like that first kitchen scene, there's like that pot that's like boiling over with some weird meat, and then she's like making dumplings, and then like she eats them, and it's like there's so much attention to like how hot everything is. And then when she meets with her agent to just talk over this audition, there's that little gecko like burning up inside the lamp, like like literally searing. So I feel like there's something about like the scorching that's being set from the beginning of the film.
Yes, Lena.
Well, and
the kettle,
spa. She like she gets burned in the spa.
And the kettle.
And the boat.
And the boat.
And when she goes and meets the director, he's got a boiling pot of water next to him.
Mm. Mm.
The producer.
which
Yeah,
is
the
so,
producer.
like,
I'm sorry, the producer. Yes. Thank you. That is good.
yeah, and it's funny because you hear it throughout the end of the scene and through the sexual assault scene as well. You hear that sort of kettle kind of
Yes.
burning on the hot plate because it's out of water, because it's not boiling over anymore. It's like it's almost like you can feel the sort of glass burning as they
Yeah.
do it, which is kind of
Like a searing sound almost.
yeah, it's really good. I love this film.
I can't remember because I haven't watched the end of this movie for like 2 months, but when everything finally comes out, like the horrific rape, is that after the explosion or before?
After, way after.
Okay, but not immediately after.
No. Yeah, because it's not really revealed until the very end. It's like
It's the final scene.
Yeah, they unpack that.
And then
unpacking.
it fades to like fuzzy.
Okay.
And props to the dog actor. Like that the dog mutilation scene, the dog killing scene was really was horrible. And that dog act, because they didn't actually kill that dog, but the dog was like perfect. So props to the animal actor and handler. But yeah, that was also weird too, is like the sort of like act in the sort of the producer's casting call, act like a dog.
Well, it was the year of the dog, right?
Oh yeah.
When she went to the New Year's celebration, they talk about it being the year of the dog.
And I didn't notice until my second watch that or I just didn't pick up on the significance of the scene where she's out with her family. She's already gotten the role, and is it her brother who keeps saying their last name Wu in like a dog bark, and you can tell it's like flickering across her face, like
Yeah.
it's the recognition is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was with the plastic bags?
That's the father's business.
I know, but it just seems so prevalent that it made me want to read into it.
Well, it's weird because like it felt like they had the fireworks scenes with the fireworks explosion, that they threw a plastic bag of fireworks too, because there was like the plastic was sort of like exploding on the thing, and then she took the payment for the guy who was sort of like who threw the fireworks and put it in the plastic bag and threw it.
Yeah,
and all the coins went everywhere.
And she's wrapped in plastic at the spa, like you guys said.
Yeah.
Plastic.
Well, when she ran out of the spa and everyone's pulled out their phones and started videotaping her, I just felt so bad for her because she was clearly in a crisis. And I didn't know if she knew where she was. And at the same time, no one's helping her. They're just recording her collapsing, right? Her mental collapse. And it was just heart-wrenching to watch. And she was so happy when her phone rang. She found her phone. But
Well, it seems like that. I mean, that was sort of a theme as well from like her sort of like eating and live streaming as like sort of a like it just the commodity, and then the press conference, and that sort of like being that sort of object to be consumed. Crazy.
well, and she literally, yeah. Well, and she really was objectified, right? Like that's the whole point. At the end of the film, she's an object who's being abused, which is a form of consumption, I guess. But and the way the director in the film, not the film's director, but the director in the film was just awful. Like the extent to which he was willing to abuse her to get the output that he wanted was awful.
There are some directors in Hollywood known to do that to actresses.
Yeah. I mean, we've already talked about this, but that whole scene was so Kubrick and Shelley Duvall, and it was in a hotel with these red floors, and like there are so many legends about him just tormenting her to get a good performance out of her.
But people are just watching it happen, which is astounding to me. I guess they're all just, I don't know, in awe of him or devoted to the whole process. I don't know.
Or just it's normal to them, you know, like because it's systemic.
That's what they were around.
Right.
I mean,
well, that's the other thing too. The kind of shockingness of it is that it did feel so normalized. It just was such a commentary of how, the film industry works, how pop culture works, and how we as humans kind of relate to each other as this sort of, to be consumed, this consumption. It's crazy.
But I think that's why I appreciated appreciate is the wrong word, but that's why the final scene, the awfulness of the final scene was effective in my mind, because it was not something that felt normal or okay. Whereas the director putting his hand on her throat to try to elicit an emotional response was like, okay, well, I can kind of buy that this would happen, right? I mean, I found it troubling, but it didn't make me squeamish. But the final scene, I mean, I read the emotions in her face, and I saw it flash in her eyes where all of a sudden she understood what was happening. And it recontextualized everything that I had seen up until that point.
It also feels like she was waking up out of a really bad dream into obviously a nightmare, but it literally her, looked like she was just waking up on the floor and that's how we kind of find her. And it seems like, it's that sort of like, again, revealing, and that sort of like that kind of like profound gestalt almost of like what the hell's going on, and that reality. It was super it was really great. It was really great.
I found myself just like longing so much for her relationship with Kiki to work out. Like and part of me was like, maybe they'll give me this like small comfort, and that will be like the little shred of like happiness in the ending. And I'm so glad they didn't. And if it had been an American film, they would have given us that catharsis to like reassure us that like maybe everything's going to be okay. And most of the films that are coming out now about this subject matter and feminism and Me Too do that. They're sort of triumphant or like overcoming adversity. And I really like that this one was like, yeah, okay, but this person who this happened to will always feel like this in some way. And so now you are going to leave this movie continuing to feel this way.
I think that's truer to the experience of trauma. Trauma against women, especially.
I mean, the American sort of palette for it isn't like they just want to kind of candy coat everything. That it's like you will, and it's either the revenge fantasy, which then you ride off into the sunset, and it's like it's never wrapped up that easily as a survivor. You are left with the scars, and you are left. And it's great because she had that scar from the boat accident on her right above her right breast too, which was kind of really interesting as well. Kind of left there, and you got to see it as they were like, she was running outside. The light of day kind of like came upon it, and it reminded me like sort of like, again, the boat scene was super interesting because it was the credits in the film the film within the film. And I thought that just the way that when she descended, and obviously her white dress had been bloodied by her head wound, all of that sort of blood and that sort of like that trauma seeped away through, which I thought was really, I thought it was really beautiful. And just the storytelling in this film is so well done. Like
the other cool thing about the scar is that when the buffer woman, when she's in one of her memories, she's fighting with her in front of the producer, and she cuts her in the same place, the other woman, which I thought was really interesting, that she's the one who's now bearing the scar, that we witnessed her memory of giving it to the other woman. So I don't know, it's just I could watch this film 10 times and still not make full sense of it, which I think is the point. Sadly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she should feel really proud about what she wrote and what she was able to get made, quite honestly. So while you're talking with her, convey that, please.
Okay. I mean, absolutely. I'm really curious to see. I mean, I know she has been collaborating with this director for a long time, and I think he's pretty well known in Taiwan. So I think I need to watch some more of their stuff that they did together. So.
And I love that Taiwanese cinema is kind of having this like sort of like renaissance right now. I feel like there's a lot of really great storytelling coming out of Taiwan, especially around queer characters and LGBT. Like for my festival, we had so much Taiwanese content, which was kind of amazing. So I love sort of seeing that when sort of like a kind of like a pocket of sort of this sort of production kind of comes up and comes out. It super, I mean, it just makes it more interesting for everyone because everyone has a different slant in storytelling as you go around the world. So
I'd be curious if in those prior films the camera treats her similarly, because it was Sean was referring to its kind rejection of the male gaze in the camera work, and how it's sad that I felt pathetic how when she's changing in like the second scene, I was just expecting her to see her topless because someone walks in front of the camera and it's a woman and she's changing. And I'd be curious if any of that preceded this film.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I'll let you know.
that's great.
Well, guys, should we leave it there? That was a pretty good chat.
Any last words?
Let's go to Angela.
Well, thanks for having a great conversation about this film because I like talking about it. And I don't know, it's been good. It's been a nice way to sort of cap off a crazy week. So I appreciate it.
And go see more people. Go see more films at the Boston Women's Film Festival.
Yeah, and I don't know, keep talking about it. Keep talking about the weird, strange, hard stuff. It makes a difference.
It's true. Right. I'm gonna count us out. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. And